Sorry, may I have your attention? Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, so I'm here to introduce an amazing scientist and also supervisor. So Taryn has been working as an instrument scientist here at SAIAB in the ATAP platform. So recently she went to the United States to attend a conference on fish telemetry. So today she is going to share with us the talk that she presented there. And without further ado, Dr. Taryn, everyone.
Thanks very much, Bethany. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to attend today's SAIAB seminar, and thank you to everyone online that's able to join as well. So as Bethany mentioned, myself and my PhD student, Dina Macari, we're very fortunate to be able to go to America to attend the 7th International Conference on Fish Telemetry. This is one that we try not to miss, and it happens every 2 years. And yeah, this is just a presentation that I gave once we were over there. Okay, so when you go to a telemetry conference, you don't need to introduce what telemetry is in any way. So for the purpose of this audience, just a quick breakdown of what it is. Essentially, understanding the movement behavior of animals can be studied using all sorts of different methods, but by far the most popular method to date is acoustic telemetry. It's pretty straightforward. It mostly uses two kinds of pieces of equipment. One is the acoustic receivers, which you place in the environment in which you want to study the animals. So this is the river, a sea, or an estuary, or lakes. And then you've got acoustic transmitters or tags, which you put either into or onto an animal. And then this tag gives out a signal, which is then picked up by the acoustic receiver if that fish is in the detection range of the receiver. So then us as researchers have to take all these tiny little pieces of information and piece together this amazing movement puzzle in general. And then you can figure out what the animals get up to, which is extremely frustrating, but also equally exciting. So over the past decade, this broad field of research known as marine functional connectivity has sort of come into being. And this has mostly been done using acoustic telemetry. Marine functional connectivity provides an understanding of this complex relationship of the movements of animals and the environments. And this is particularly important for fish species for management, because whether you're looking at single species or multiple species or even an ecosystem level, you actually need information on the movements of animals to infer really important management decisions or management regulations. So knowledge on connectivity of marine fishes will hopefully lead to this improved management. And it was also really important when it comes to predictions of how animals or fish species or aquatic species may change their movement behavior with a changing climate. So understanding how animals might move given increased upwelling or increased marine heat waves will really help us understand things a bit better in order to try and effectively manage them. The Southwest Indian Ocean is this large area over here in the Southwest Indian Ocean, and includes a number of different countries, including South Africa, Mozambique, Tanzania, Kenya, the Comores, Seychelles, Mauritius, and then the French islands of Réunion and Mayotte. And the beauty of this area is it just has so many different kinds of environments. You've got mangroves, you've got seagrass beds, you've got these beautiful coral reefs, you've got rocky reefs, you've got sandy shores. So literally many of the types of habitats you can think of, they could be found within the Southwest Indian Ocean. And because you've got all these different kinds of amazing environments and ecosystems, the SWIO is actually one of the highest areas of marine diversity and endemism in the whole entire world. It's home to at least 5 species of turtles, 27 species of dolphins and whales, including a breeding population of humpback whales. You have dugongs, you've got whale sharks, and then on top of this, you've got thousands of fishes, sharks, and rays, which are important for commercial purposes, recreational purposes, subsistence or small-scale purposes, and even for marine tourism. But unfortunately, this area also is extensively populated with more than 100 million people currently living along the coastlines in the region. And many of these people have cultures and traditions deeply entrenched into and connected with the ocean. So despite this area's incredible wealth, it also has one of the highest poverty rates in the world. And by the year 2050, they're expected to be more than 350 million people living along the stretch of coastline. So as such, the pressures on these systems will only increase, putting both human and the marine populations at risk. So as such, in order to try and protect these species, we need to start thinking about how we can better manage them. And obviously, movement information is where this becomes important. So movement, again, is just one of the puzzles, one of the pieces to the puzzle that we can use for management. You obviously have your social and your economic aspects, which are equally important to study as in addition to these biological components. But trying to manage fishery species that move openly in an open ocean where there are no borders, they don't listen to boundaries of countries. It's a bit like the Wild Wild West, or in this case, the Wild Wild East. And I shamelessly stole this slide from a UK researcher that presented at the same conference. They're having a similar situation in the UK where parties are just not necessarily agreeing. But the SWIO region has its fair share of difficulties and problems as well. So not only do you have civil unrest in some places, but you've got deep mistrust between government and researchers and others. So this makes managing things pretty tricky in general. So in order to try and understand where research on movement ecology as such might go in the future, we need to sort of look back. So what we did was decide to do a bit of a deep literature dive using the TrackDat database, which is over here. For the students and the postdocs in the room, this database is actually run and currently managed by a postdoc. And while they were doing, him and a PhD student decided to put this whole online database together, which has actually ended up being an incredible resource to use for acoustic telemetry research. So we did this whole deep literature dive, and we looked at scientific papers, we looked at theses and articles in conference proceedings, and we only considered acoustic telemetry because this is where our focus is. So it wasn't any satellite tagging, it wasn't any other movement method, it was using acoustic telemetry. So in total, 125 papers were spit out, which is wonderful, but of those, only 101 were relevant. So the ones that were excluded either fell out of the study area, or they were looking at like tag effect study, which wasn't necessarily looking at a movement component as such, or if a thesis had been published, then that thesis was not considered. So all these papers, 101 that covered some kind of aspect of connectivity or looked at movement within the SWIO region. The first paper was actually published in 1998, and interestingly, on the coelacanths. So that was pretty cool, looking at some movement over there. And the paper's number of publications of it obviously only steadily increased over time. So in terms of the number of publications per country, South Africa came out tops, followed by the Seychelles, Mozambique, and Reunion Island. It wasn't necessarily surprising with the Seychelles and Reunion coming out, and even Mozambique, because they've had more or less stable acoustic receiver arrays deployed in the area. And South Africa, there we go. There's our, when the bench comes up, there's our gold trophy, because we've got first prize. But this isn't really surprising to see that the number of studies has been the most for South Africa, because the acoustic tracking array platform, which has been formalized since 2011, has assisted in the research of movement ecology of many species, and many researchers use this platform. But acoustic telemetry has actually started as early as 2002, at least in the SWIO, in many of our smaller estuaries. So we've had very strong record of acoustic telemetry for the past almost 23 years. In terms of the number of species, a total of 56 different species have been studied using acoustic telemetry, falling within 29 species. Interestingly, the bulk of that was, or at least more than half, was made up with teleosts. So those are the bony fish. So 53.3% of the publications were on teleosts, 45.1 were on elasmobranchs, so that's sharks and rays. And then interestingly, we had a single squid species studied in South Africa and green turtles in the French island of Mayotte. Of those species studies, they can be broadly broken up into species of commercial importance. So you're looking at your big tuna species, those of recreational importance, like your giant kingfish or bonefish, those that are of small scale or subsistence importance. Many of the groupers fall into that. We've got large migratory sharks, including many of the carcharodonid species. So you're looking at bull sharks, spinner sharks, black tips, gray reefs, a bunch of different tiger sharks. And then we're also looking at those of tourism importance, like your whale sharks and your reef mantas. And interestingly, of the countries with the most number of species that are studied, you guessed it, South Africa was tops. So 26 of the 56 species have been studied in South Africa. So why do we even need this interest? Why this interest in connectivity? Why do we even need something like a regional array? As South Africans, we look at our amazing array and we go, sweet, we can do all the research we need to do in South Africa. It's great. But what happens with animals that start crossing borders? You're not seeing that movement into other countries. So you're missing out on aspects of the bigger picture. So this is sort of the motivation between this regional approach to a giant acoustic array. And this isn't necessarily limited to just our region in the world. Many other countries have done similar approaches where they've slowly started covering vast expanses of their coastlines across countries with acoustic receivers. So really building these fantastic cross-country regional networks. So with the most stable long-term array being in South Africa, you need to get this regional approach going and start connecting the little dots between the countries. There's a map, which I'll show near the end, which shows where we know that there's current listening power and where we're hopefully going to start closing some gaps. So when it comes to move to species that are moving between different countries along the coastline, like I said, they don't listen to jurisdictional boundaries. It means nothing to them at the greater scheme of things. But trying to get a better understanding of connectivity is really important when you've got species targeted and highly used differently in different countries. For example, the white-spotted wedgefish over here, which is also known as the giant sand shark, was tagged along the South African coastline. And as you can see, lots of movement. So here's the boundary. This is South Africa. There's Mozambique. Lots of movements within South Africa, but also some connectivity with southern Mozambique, which is really important considering how differently this species is used between the two countries. So quite targeted as a recreational species in South Africa, but exceptionally heavily targeted for their meat and their fins just across the border. This is actually a seizure of a whole boat freezer. All of these things that you see here are individual white-spotted wedgefish that have caught, finned, killed, and they're being transported to wherever they're going to go. So understanding this connectivity is really important when it comes to trying to manage these wide-ranging species. If we consider some other examples, a paper by Daly et al. Also tagged 4 different carcharodonid species, including bull sharks, black tips, gray reef, and tiger sharks, and pretty much found similar results, which is not surprising, where you've got this extensive movement in South Africa, but also across the boundary, and then movements within Mozambique itself. Large-scale connectivity is also been seen not only between South Africa and southern Mozambique, which is sort of where we've got receivers just kind of spreading up, but also across the region. For example, a tiger shark was tagged at Reunion Island. I can't remember the exact year, but it was never detected in their acoustic receiver array, which is pretty surprising considering it's about 40 receivers strong, and it's a very small island, so a relatively small area of coastline to cover. So it was never detected at Reunion, but a couple of years later, I think about a year and a half, it popped up at Port St. John's along South Africa's wild coast. It was then recorded moving into southern Mozambique before disappearing again. And then eventually a recapture was happened in Madagascar, where that shark was caught and killed. So this just is one example of one individuals and one species that is moving extensively throughout the region. And finally, as the climate only continues to change, we're going to start seeing some really strange things happening along the coastline. This is going to most likely result in some species distribution shifts, and we might see animals moving to places where they might necessarily never have gone before. So an example was a bull shark that was tagged in KwaZulu-Natal. It moved into southern Mozambique before moving quickly down the coastline to Mossel Bay, which is in the Western Cape province of South Africa, and it disappeared for about 2.5 years. This bull shark was recaptured in Nigeria by a small-scale fisher. This is literally that shark that was tagged. There's the tag. So it's an example of a species that is moving to places where it's most likely not meant to go to, because up here in Namibia, you've got this permanent upwelling cell that's just kind of there, preventing species from moving across, because it's really, really cold. So it's this thermal barrier. They can't get through this patch of horrible water. So this shark most likely either moved exceptionally close inshore or actually ventured offshore. But again, just another example of an incredible movement. I realize this is very much not the Southwest Indian Ocean, but these are the kinds of movements that might start happening. And a regional approach to acoustic telemetry may allow us to start being able to pick up on these kinds of things. So in a nutshell, there's currently listening power, all along South Africa. So if you take the boundary of the SWIO, which is sort of the southern tip of Africa, we've got good listening power in South Africa up into southern Mozambique. We've got some receivers. I say we, the greater we. This is obviously multiple collaborators and multiple research organizations. So it's not we as in SAIAB. Lots in the Seychelles, lots in Reunion, and some in Madagascar. Through some projects that are coming online, we're hopefully going to expand some listening power into other regions, including the Comores and through Mayotte, as well as right in the middle of the Mozambique Channel here at one of the French scattered islands known as Europa. But over time, what we're hoping to do is to create this really regional acoustic receiver array, which can cover an extensive coastline, a distance of coastline, which can facilitate large-scale movements on these migratory species. But if you've got set little arrays in certain places, you can also start understanding movements of really local and resident species. So not only can these larger regional networks collect information on migratory species, but you can answer a whole bunch of other different species related to the movement of animals. There are obviously some major limitations when it comes to trying to get something like this up and running. First of all, funding is an ongoing issue. All of us here know that the pool of money is only getting a little bit smaller every year. So finding reliable funding sources that can fund you over the long term is really, really difficult. Personnel continues to be, and in the same breath, capacity continues to be a struggle as well. So often you can find money for equipment, but not necessarily money for people. And maintaining something of this size and managing something of this size requires significant personnel and capacity in order to do so. So before you can really start formalizing these bigger regional networks, those are the types of considerations you have to keep in mind when you're trying to develop something like this. But yeah, hopefully through these projects, which run for the next 4 years, we will start dipping our toes into this idea of this regional network, and through that, leverage some more funding, which may be able to see us maintaining that in the long term. So this is, for those that don't know, these are the Great Lakes in North America, the biggest body of fresh water in the world. Every single little dot that you see is an acoustic receiver that is currently positioned throughout the Great Lakes, which is unbelievable. Over here alone, there are about 3,000. Over here alone, there are about 3,000. Over here alone, there are about 3,000. So this is their broad scale network approach, where they're really starting to find out some exceptional movement information about a whole suite of species. So their dream is really our reality when it comes to, or our dream is really their reality when it comes to these regional broad scale networks. No, wrong way. These slides are big. So I think where is it? There we go. So the talk is short and sweet today, but I'd just like to thank everybody that contributed to this presentation. And you may have seen this name floating around a lot. Dr. Ryan Daly from the Oceanographic Research Institute really needs to be singled out because of his exquisite underwater photos that he takes and of all the research that he does. So all the examples of the large scale connectivity that was done has mostly been involved, or been led by Ryan. So yeah, special shout out to him. And I just want to also say that this is the first time that anybody's actually seen my presentation, because the only technical glitch that happened throughout the entire conference was during my talk. So I had to just wing it and just have no slides. So I'm glad that you were able to see the pictures that I put together. I made a joke about load shedding and we carried on, so it was fine. But yeah, with that, thank you very much. And if anybody has questions, I'll be happy to take them. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Taryn, for an amazing talk. Yeah, we'll take questions. We'll start from the room, then we'll go online. Yes, I see Alex. Yes.
Thanks to your magical talk, plus use of visuals. No, it was awesome. That second last slide, the Great Lakes with like those thousands of receivers. I'm just curious, how many of the receivers are serviced by US receivers versus Canadian receivers? And then sort of what, you obviously, you're just in the States, but what's the, in terms of, you often read about science funding pools in the States, what's going to happen with the receivers that are sort of managed by the US organizations?
Yeah, so when it comes specifically to the Great Lakes, they get big funding from the US Geological Services company or whatever, USGS. Yeah. So they've almost got stable funding. I think it's not, I know that they've got different layers of funding. It's federal and regional and whatever else. But my understanding with the Great Lakes is that things will be more or less secure. Don't know what the breakdown is in terms of US versus Canadian, because obviously the boundary runs somewhere in the middle of the lake. But I know that the Canadian partners have reached out to say, if you need us to roll over, let us know, because obviously you're in a body of water. So I think in terms of their network, they're okay. In terms of the rest of America, it is touch and go, depending which organization you work with. There are a lot of researchers and a lot of networks whose futures are uncertain at the moment. There are sister networks that are offering to house data just to secure that so that it doesn't get deleted in any way. But yeah, it's the ins and outs for them to decide, but there are certain networks that are most certainly at risk.
Thanks, Alex, for the question. Do we have any other question in the room before we move on online? If there's any.
I'm assuming it was just so well explained. If you're too shy, please come to my office. I'm very happy to talk about this.
Okay, we'll get one. Tadeo.
Just to repeat on the point of the Great Lakes, that's a freshwater system, right?
Yes.
Are there any plans about also expanding your network into the freshwater systems within South Africa?
Yes, yes. Freshwater is the dream. So if you're keen to start telemetry in freshwater, please approach me. Yeah, so it would be great from a South African perspective anyway to start expanding into the freshwater. That's always been on the cards, and it's something that I'm very interested in going into. It's, I guess, difficult from what species do we study kind of perspective, just because a lot of the larger body fish are obviously the horrible invasives, but yeah, definitely keen. So if it's something that you'd be interested in, please come visit me in my office.
Awesome. Yeah, no other questions. Thank you so much, Taryn, for sharing. Let's just give you a round of applause. welcome to approach it for any other questions. Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you to those online.